whenever you pull up the news or pull up your news feed or whatever, I don't know what the percentage, probably 80 to 90% or more seems to be bad news or just negative news. We are overrun with negativity and bipartisanship or, just all kinds of stuff that makes you angry because, people feed on that and it sells. The thing is that it's not that hard to be a good person in reality. The bar is pretty low if you really think about it. And I think that there's a lot of, and still think that there's a way more good people than bad people out there personally. And, but we just don't hear that side of it. We just constantly are barraged with negativity in social media and everything else. And so I think people like you and I, to the extent that we have a platform and that we've created that, the more we can share that's positive, the more that changes that balance a little bit. And if other people see that and start doing the same thing, then I don't think there's any reason that we have to have so much negative out there in the world.
Via podcast. I'm your host, Sean Trace, and I have an awesome guest with me today. And I'm really excited to talk to you about kind of what you do. Can you tell people who you are and all of the fun things that you do?
Well, my name is Bryan Jepson. I'm an emergency medicine physician, now retired, actually. I retired in February, but I also, my encore career, I like to call it, is a financial planner. So I went back to school at a late age after a long career in medicine, got a master's in finance, became a certified financial planner, and that's now what I do full time.
That's awesome. Well, and it's interesting because one of the reasons I had asked you to come back on and wanted you to come on to kind of a different podcast angle. Like, this is about content because you create and spread message through your content. But first of all, I wanted to ask you this because you spent years in emergency medicine helping people in crisis, What made you realize content and podcasting could also help people in a meaningful way? You started making all this content. What helped you go, hey, this is going to be something I can do and help people?
I think a lot of it is when you leave a high impact career, you're leaving behind an identity to a degree.
Yeah.
And that identity as a physician is helping people, right? And so I think for me, it would feel like a cliff, I guess, falling off a cliff if I just left medicine and just went and did stuff for myself. And so I found a way, that's partially why I chose a different career instead of just retiring, is that allowed me to continue working and helping people and doing something that I enjoyed. It's a different avenue completely than medicine, but the idea is the same. And the reason why I started doing content production is that part of my, I guess, personal mission statement is not just helping individual clients, but also improving financial education generally among the niche or the clients that I work with, and that's physicians, number one, and people with special needs, number two. And so that's a way that I can, I guess, scale my impact. Where, even if somebody doesn't become a client with me, they can still learn and that I can still do something that helps them, I think.
I love that. It's one of the things too, is that I was a children's teacher for many years. And so, for me as well, it was a way that I realized I could continue to have an impact. And, it looks a little different than my teaching does, but I still was helping people, by the information I was sharing, And so I really like, and that speaks to me, how you say, it's this core mission is kind of still the same, and it's just I'd say the outlet, it has changed, but you're still doing the same thing,
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it's fun. I enjoy it. I like learning myself. But
Yeah.
most of the time as I go through and I'm learning things, I like sharing that with others so that they can also learn along with me, I guess. And
Yes.
so I come at it, I guess, as an expert because I'm a few steps ahead, but
Yeah.
hopefully pulling others along with me rather than just trying to separate myself from other people is the way I approach it.
I love that because that's exactly the approach I had for my Growing Money podcast. Like, I didn't know about personal finance, and I created this podcast because I wasn't the money guy. That was not
Yeah.
part of my identity. I didn't have this, like it's funny because people will come on and people will see me now and come up like, "Oh, Sean, you've got your finances all together." And I was like, "Oh, dude, no, I am headed in the right direction. I am steering this way, but like I'm still learning. It is a process
Yeah.
for me." And it's actually
Yeah.
one of my friends. I last year, a couple of years ago now, I did my MBA. And it was right after COVID. We were experiencing still a major lockdown in Vietnam. And I was like, actually, we had just gotten out of the lockdown. And I said, you know what? I want to learn more about money. So I said, let me do my MBA. And like, I got in my MBA and I was like, hey, they don't teach you about money here. This is all other stuff.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
I still learned a lot. And I love that. And one of my friends is a VP at Fidelity. And yesterday we were talking about, she went through the MBA with me. That's how we met. And she's a
Yeah.
really awesome individual. And both of us were like, she's like, I'm looking at, a swan song of my career. And she's like, she's looking at being a CFP. And she's like, hey, Sean, why don't you do it with me? And I was like, I don't know if I want to be a CFP but I'd love to learn this stuff. But my point being, like,
Yeah.
as I never thought that could be possible. And I'm not necessarily looking at, but the idea about being able to learn that stuff and to share that
Yeah.
journey, like that resonates with me because if I do it, I'm going to be like, guys, listen to what I learned yesterday. Who
Yeah,
knew?
exactly.
And that
Yeah.
type of
Yeah.
that people resonate with that.
Yeah, similar experience with me when because when I decided I wanted to do something differently besides medicine, and as you leave medicine, you have lots of options. I mean, you can pick a non-clinical career. There's a variety of ways that you can work as a doctor, but not in the trenches.
Yeah.
But for me, I just wanted to do something totally different. Partially because I could, I didn't need doctor money anymore. I could just, I could create some options where I could explore other things, other avenues.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure exactly what I wanted to do within that. I just knew that I was interested in personal finance and investing, and I wanted to know more about it.
Yeah.
And went and got a master's in finance, not really knowing what that was going to lead to professionally. And like your experience with an MBA, probably, I mean, I learned a lot of cool stuff about finance. Uh, Very little of it was applicable to personal finance, right? It was
Right.
more kind of um, academic, mathematical, if institutional level kind of stuff, which I thought was fascinating and interesting, and I loved it. But it wasn't something that um, helped me from day to day.
Yeah.
And so until I became a CFP, where that actually was more of the applicable kind of functional use of finance, that's when I really learned the stuff that was useful. And that when I started doing that, that's when I knew that I had stuff that I can now share with other people that they might care about, as opposed to, all the mathematical formulas that go into, time value of money equations.
Right. Well, you started all this, you created your own podcast and you're making all types of content. Like, what message or feeling are you hoping people walk away from after listening to your podcast, your content?
It's a good question. My content, I'm creating content in various avenues, kind of like you are. I
Yeah,
mean,
right.
and with different themes that I direct towards. I have special needs content. I have physician written content on my blog, on my website, and then this podcast is a little bit different because it's focusing more on career transition. So that's a different focus than just personal finance. I mean, obviously finance plays a role in that, But that's not what we talk the most about. What we talk the most about is what it's like um, on the identity side or on the behavioral side or the psychology side of making a major transition, whether that's to retirement or to a different career like I did. I think that there's a lot of people that face that. I mean, we all face that at some point.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people facing it, and if you're coming from a high impact career, I think that transition is more difficult psychologically, even if you're financially prepared. And so what I hope from our podcast, it's called the Second Shift Podcast, is that people walk away feeling a little bit more prepared to tackle that transition and to ask the right questions, to have the conversations with their significant other that they may not have had or thought about. That's going to make that transition a lot smoother. So that because a lot of people become depressed after they retire, because they haven't done the planning and they haven't figured out what they really want next. And so it's just like falling, like I mentioned before, it's kind of like falling off a cliff where you're going from high impact to no impact, and that's difficult for a lot of people. I think most people.
Right. That's an interesting thing, because it's like when people go through these major transitions in their life, you go from something that you're used to something that's very different, and it's like you kind of, I remember when I moved from the US to Asia, like it was pretty dramatic, and the little things that you do when you're in this new place get um are you feel ungrounded, and having that
Yeah.
ability to ground is a really powerful thing. And what I'm where I'm getting at, though, is like when you're able to hear people who've gone through it, who've been there and
Yeah.
found that meaning again. Like I connected with a group of people that were like, "Hey, this is how I've done this. This is what I do," and it wasn't the way I ended up doing it, but it
Yeah.
helped me get to the other side, And so I love that you have that mission and that purpose in what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think everybody's situation is different, right? I mean, you can't totally walk in somebody else's shoes because your circumstances are different, but you can definitely learn from their journey. And so that's most of the people so far that we've had on there have been people that have gone through the journey, or at least, well on the other side of it, and have perspective that they can share about the surprises or the good things, or the challenges, or stuff that can be adapted to anybody's situation, I think. And so, like and some of it is the things you don't think about necessarily. So for example, for those who are thinking about retirement and you say, "Oh, what do you want to do in retirement?" They say, "Well, I want to travel, or I want to spend time with my grandkids," or stuff like that. But they forget, "Oh, okay, well, what do you want to do next Tuesday?" Because
Right.
those travel and spending time with family, those are big mission goals, but not the day-to-day goals that sometimes you have to fill that time, and some of the things that, okay, well, what is my spouse, what are their routines that I'm now disrupting because I'm retired and am around, so some of those other things, it just reminds us that there are other things that we have to think about that maybe we haven't thought about before.
I love that. I was curious about this next thing because, when I talk to you, I'm just really amazed at your ability to put yourself out there, and because I see a lot of smart professionals are afraid to put themselves out there online. What helped you finally start creating content publicly? Because it's not easy, and it's not easy to put that stuff out there and like, am I going to get judged? How is this going to be
Yeah.
received? What helped you in that process?
I think part of it is my personality, that I'm not afraid to look stupid,
Yeah, me
to
too.
some degree, or where it's like, I'm not afraid to fail,
I
and
love that.
I think that that's what keeps people in. locked into a situation where maybe they're not completely happy or satisfied, is that they're afraid to take a step out of that because they're afraid of failing.
Yeah.
And, to me, it's not like everything I've done has been a smashing success, but when it hasn't, I still don't look at it as a failure. I look
Yeah.
at it as a learning experience. And because, that's allowed me to use those tools and do something different that maybe is a little bit better next time. So I think my personal experience probably started when, maybe 20 years ago, 20, almost, yeah, about 20 years ago when I started. So I'm an emergency medicine physician, but for about 8 years, I did some medical work with special needs kids, and kind of looking at their biomedical stuff and doing some integrative medicine with them. And as part of that, I've kind of, so that was kind of a second shift for me in the middle of my emergency medicine career that was very different than emergency medicine. But as part of that, I also created a lot of content, wrote a book, was a speaker in various national and international conferences. So I kind of had that experience before, to know that, um, yeah, it's kind of uncomfortable putting yourself out in front of people, but at the same time, people are very appreciative when you do
Yep.
because, they have something or you have something that you can share with them that they're looking for. And once I realized that, I guess the discomfort of outing myself publicly, if you will, goes away a little bit because, I realize that it's worth it because I'm doing something good for somebody.
I love that. And I think the idea of realizing that you're really doing something that's good for somebody and it matters. Like, that's one of the things I have to remind myself every day that I show up, every time I'm getting on this podcast, like what I'm doing matters. Being here, showing up matters. And, I try to approach content creation not through a lens of just like, let's uh let's make money, let's do this, let's create a sales funnel. I'm like, how can we touch someone's life? How can we make
Yeah.
a difference for someone? Because it's like, there's a lot of reasons to do things. Don't get me wrong. I love money. I love making money. But if you can approach this from, having a real why, having a real mission, having a real purpose behind what you're putting out there, it's really, 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 powerful thing to do. But I want to ask you another question too, because like when you started this, what surprised you most once you started podcasting and sharing your thoughts online?
Well, I'll say I'm still early in the process. So with my podcast, I mean, we've only been going for a couple of months, but what I'm surprised, yeah, I don't know. It's always easy to be surprised that people want to hear what you say. you
Right.
know, that lots of times that just feels surprising in some ways. And so the fact that people are starting to engage with it, that it is helping, you're getting more views. That's a pleasant surprise. I mean, that motivates you to keep going because, like you'd mentioned, if you're creating content for the money, you got a long way to go before you're making any money on it, right? So it takes a while to generate an audience that's big enough that you're creating much money on it, at least any kind of meaningful money. So
Yeah.
so if you're just doing it for money, you're going to get discouraged pretty quickly, I would say. And so you have to have some other reason to keep going until, you have created the audience that at some point maybe you will get some reimbursement and make it more valuable, to you personally. So I think, uh, that's how I approach my, um, just content creation in general. Yes, for me, I'm creating content within a niche of a financial planner, so it could lead to clients and generate income that way outside of just, money directly from the content. But, that's not really why I'm doing it.
Yeah.
I'm really doing it more just to help improve financial education. And so if you have whatever your content is, you got to create a mission and your why first. And like anything, if money is your focus, you can never have enough. So
Yeah.
money should not be your focus. It should be a tool to help you accomplish whatever better goal you have.
I love that. I talk about that so often. Money is a tool. And I think that that's something that people forget to really emphasize because, you know, it's a tool that you can use for a lot of different things. You can cook a meal with a knife. You can, cut someone with a knife. With a hammer, you can build a house. You can also, hit someone over the top of the head. Neither the
Yeah,
latter is good,
yeah, very
but
violent thoughts.
right? Like, ooh, what am I gonna do
Just
with
kidding.
these? The intrusive thoughts win.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, the idea being, money's the same. It is simply a tool that you can do great stuff with or
Yeah,
do bad stuff with. And it itself though is a neutral tool. It's how you
right.
how you figure out you're gonna use it. But I want to ask you this too, because you talked about this a little bit, but do you think content can genuinely change people's lives, or is it more about helping people feel less alone? What are you trying to do with what you're creating? Is it like, you know what, this is matters here. I can change someone's like existence.
I think it depends on I think it depends on your content,
Yeah,
and what the focus is of it. So my focus is on financial planning and retirement planning and things like that. So do I think it changes people's lives? It can. Absolutely it can. And if they're I think a lot of it too depends on what kind of practical information you're giving. I mean, if you're
yeah,
just going online and you're just filling space, then
right,
maybe that's not helping anybody, right? It's just filling
yeah,
space. But if you're actually giving them tools and advice that they can then use to make their lives better, then hopefully they'll do that. And even if it's just by a little bit, then I feel good that however whatever effort I went into creating it was worthwhile. So, but yeah, I think there's lots of content out there, and a lot of it is good content, and a lot of it is just noise. And
right,
so I think you have to really focus in. And again, I think it comes down to the why are you doing it?
yeah,
What's your mission for that content? What's the purpose of it? And then and who am I trying to help? Who's my audience that I really am trying to impact? And then you create the content for that audience. So it's not just general, information necessarily. You have a person in mind that you're saying, okay, I could help this person if I say this thing.
yep, yep. I Tomorrow morning I'm waking up early, grabbing some trash bags. I'm gonna walk up and down my street and clean the street. And I'm gonna make a video of it. I've done it before without videos, but it's something that I do every now and then because my street gets really dirty. And the whole point of the video is that I was looking at all these people doing talking head videos. They sit there and they talk in the video, and I was like, I want to talk to people about Marcus Aurelius, and he says, "Waste no more time asking what a good man should be. Be one." And
Yeah.
um, that struck me because I was like, being part of the solution, being part of creating something that inspires people, that helps people, because I love what you're saying. Like, there's a lot of spam out there. There is a lot of
Yeah.
stuff that just is not helping. But you got to figure out who it is that you want to help and what you want to be doing. And that like leads me to my next question. Like, what kind of stories or conversations do you think seem to resonate most deeply with your audience?
You know, just to go back to a little bit to what you just said. Um, Whenever you pull up the news or pull up your news feed or whatever, I don't know what the percentage, probably 80 to 90% or more seems to be bad news or just
Right? Yeah.
negative news. We are overrun with negativity and bipartisanship or, just all kinds of stuff that makes you angry
Hmm.
because, people feed on that, and it sells. So I love it when what you just said that you're planning on doing
Yeah.
is going to be out there. I love those kind of stories because it helps to start pulling back that balance a little bit. Because I
Yep.
think if we had a lot more content that showed people doing good things and being
Yes.
positive and
Yep.
being helpful, um, that would make our world better. And
Yep.
so the things that I personally love to watch in the special needs space in particular is when, you see feeds of people that are being really nice to special needs
Yeah.
individuals, right? Brings a tear to my eye every time because as a dad of the special needs sons, I know a lot of times how people are not nice to them or
Ugh.
judge them or, are just essentially, dismiss them is probably the more common thing is that they're just disregarded.
Mm.
But when other people that are quote unquote normal or neurotypical go out of their way to make someone with special needs feel seen, I love it. I could watch those all day long. So that's the kind of content that I personally like to watch. Now, how do I produce that as somebody who's trying to educate? I think a lot of it is just helping people. Um, I don't know, find their way where they can um, just be successful and to disregard the negative aspects of what's out there. So I guess a physician example is all you hear about in medicine is burnout.
Yeah.
How terrible the medical system is and burnout. Okay, well, is there a way that I can positively spin burnout to create a longer career or a different career or something else? So just giving tools that help turn the negativity into something positive.
I saw a video, with 2 special needs gentlemen, young men, and it was one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. It was such
Yeah,
lovely content. I was watching it, um, last night no, a couple nights ago. I sat down with my wife, and like I said, there's just so much crap on the internet, and I'm just sorry if I sound awful, but it's horrible stuff. And I started watching this video, and luckily lately of late, my feed has been I've been liking certain videos about people doing nice things for other people. There's this one kid, and he's like, "I'm gonna buy you this. Here's a car. You seem like you're down on luck. Here's $1,000." And this video started off with these two special needs boys in this store, and they were both wearing Edmonton Oilers shirts. And immediately, I was just like, "Oh, no. What's gonna go? Is it gonna be someone harassing these kids? Someone gonna giving them a hard time? Is it?" And this guy pulled them and was like, "Hey, guys." And they're like, "Yeah." And he's like, "Do you guys like the Edmonton Oilers?" And they were like, "Oh, yeah. Love the Edmonton Oilers." And he's like, "I what are you guys doing tonight?" And they're like, "Well, we're not I'm gonna go home. I'm gonna go and eat. I've got families at home." And they're like, "Well, I've got something for you. Do you guys wanna buy some Oilers tickets for $1?" And they're like, "We can't buy Oilers tickets for $1." He's like, "Do you wanna buy them for $1?" They're like, "Yeah, of course we do." And he's like, "Well, you don't need to buy them for $1. We're gonna send you to the Edmonton Oilers game." And then they took these 2 guys to the Oilers game, and they were personally invited by the Gretzky family, which is absolutely awesome. Wayne was there,
yeah,
he signed both of the jerseys for these guys. And they watched the game. It was the most organically beautiful thing I've ever seen. And it was like
yeah,
and it was like, by the end of the video, they weren't 2 special needs guys. They were just 2 beautiful humans enjoying
yeah,
a hockey game. And it was so humanizing. It was so just beautiful of like this shared experience. And I just finished that and I looked up at my wife and we were both crying. It was a 90-second video and it brought us both to tears about the humanity, the community, and just the power of something that connects people. It doesn't matter who you are, but these guys came
yeah,
together through the love of this sport, the love of this game. and being Canadian, hey, it's pretty
Yeah.
awesome, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was just so powerful. And that to me, I was like, I finished watching that and I was just like, man, I've got to make more stuff. I got to be
Yeah.
making stuff. I got to be putting it out there because we need more people doing that stuff?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, the thing is that it's not that hard to be a good person
Right.
in reality. The bar is pretty low if you really think about it. Where and I think that there's a lot of and I still think that there's a way more good people than bad people out there personally. And, but we just don't hear that side of it. We just constantly are barraged with negativity in social media and everything else. And so I think people like you and I, to the extent that we have a platform and that we've created that, the more we can share that's positive, the
Yeah,
more that changes that balance a little bit. And if other people see that and start doing the same thing, then I don't think there's any reason that we have to have so much negative out there in the world.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Well, you talk with a lot about with your content, a lot about anxiety and identity and transition and purpose. Why do you think those conversations are connecting with people right now?
Well, I think that there is a lot of just in general. I think that there is a lot of anxiety out there.
Yeah,
That's uh, honestly often driven by the news cycle.
yeah,
You have a lot of negativity, and it drives anxiety in people. But I think a lot of people anxiety is, if it's not a clinical anxiety, just general anxiety is often driven by fear of
yeah,
the unknown, right? And so, I think a lot of anxiety happens when you don't plan.
yeah.
And that if you plan and you create options and you do some thinking about it ahead of time, a lot of that anxiety can be dealt with. It doesn't mean it goes away entirely. It still takes some courage to take the step forward into the dark. But if you have a plan and you try and align that plan with what you really want, what you value, and you've taken the time to define that for yourself, a lot of that anxiety can be mitigated and it now becomes manageable as opposed to just overwhelming to the point that you can't act.
Mhm. I deal with a lot of anxiety, and, you're spot on. I have to be very careful with what I consume, from the news cycle, from social media, from online, from just life. But I find that if I can find things that help me reconnect with that peaceful center, it's really good? And I think that there are people that sit there and do it. I have these certain motivational channels that I'll tune into all the time, and they help me get through my day? And I
Yeah.
think that, um it's a step-by-step game? It's step by
Yeah.
step. You just gotta get through your days, but the fact that if you can be out there creating content that can help someone else step by step to get through their day, that's powerful?
Yeah. You're providing the tools to help them do that. Now, I'm going to give a shameless plug,
Please do.
not for myself, but for my son. So, my son, Aaron, has autism. He's 28 years old now. He has minimal verbal skills, but he's been able to learn how to type and is a wonderful writer. Very intelligent on the inside. That you wouldn't necessarily know it from meeting him directly. But he's written a book that's called "I Never Get Lost in the Woods" by Bryan Jepson, and it's a book. It's a novel. It's a murder thriller mystery novel. So it's actually a very exciting story. But the main character also has autism, and her safe place is the woods, which is why it's titled that. I never get lost in the woods. That's where she goes and can reconnect with nature, because her world is all anxiety driven. It is completely an entire world of anxiety, and everything that she does is to cope with that, which is, she's Aaron's surrogate, in describing his own world. But her method is nature, and my own son's method is also being outside in nature and hiking and doing the things that are outside. So I think he's a great example of how, that anxiety is present. It never goes away entirely. And often drives everything that he's doing throughout the day to kind of help just deal with it. But he's found a way and was able to convey that to others through his book that says, okay, this is what helps me, and maybe it might help you too. So I think
That's
that's a great example of content creation.
I love it. It is. It is, you know? I wanted to ask you this because have you noticed that creating content changed you personally? The way you think, communicate, or even understand yourself?
Absolutely. I mean, in order to create content, you have to think about how to say it, right? Yeah, you have to think about how you're going to express it so that it comes across and makes some sense to somebody besides yourself. And actually getting to that point requires that you understand it somewhat yourself. Because if you can't understand it yourself, you can't really explain it well to others. And
Yeah.
so most of the time when I'm have some sort of a financial question, whether personally or a question that comes up through a client interaction, um, creating that content helps me to say it better, I guess, the next time if it comes up again or when it comes up again, and also just personally helps me to understand it better for my own information. So I mean, I think there's nothing quite as filtering in your own mind is having to either write it down or say it out loud to somebody else.
Yeah.
Because that way you really you're forced to really understand what you're saying.
Yeah. I want to ask you one last question. If someone listening has an important message inside of them, but keeps overthinking like content creation, what would you want to tell them?
You just got to step into the dark. I think that that's the biggest thing is it never gets easier to do it until you start.
Yeah, right.
And you just have to start and realize, the good news, I guess, with most content creation and podcasts and things like that is when you first start, you don't have a big audience.
Yeah.
So, if that helps you think about, okay, well, my mom is listening, so I can do this. Then maybe that'll help you get started. But again, I think that the most important thing is if you have that message inside of you, you have to ask yourself, why are you doing it? Why do you want to share it? Who are you trying to share it to, and how do you expect that it will help them? And then I think that should give you the motivation to kind of overcome that fear of the process and seeing yourself on video on the YouTube or whatever. That's hard, or listening to your voice. I remember the first time I recorded my
Right.
voice, I thought it just sounded like really weird and didn't sound anything like me. And so a lot of it is just being able to overcome that self deprecation or judgment to just say, okay, you know what? Other people aren't looking at me like that. They're looking at me as somebody who can be helpful.
I love that. Well, where can people go to find more about you and your podcast and the content that you're creating?
There's a couple places. Probably the central place is my website. So it's Bryan Jepson, BryanJepson.com. So everything I'm doing is linked on that website. Our podcast is called the Second Shift Podcast, and we have a website for that. It's second, the number two ND, secondshiftpodcast.com. Or you can just find it wherever you find your podcasts. It's out there and available. So those are the big places. If you're interested in becoming a client, you can link to. I work at Targeted Wealth Solutions. But there's a link to that on my website, so you can find it there.